Redshift 3.5 came out yesterday, and I wanted to go over my first impressions because there's a lot in this update, a lot of cool stuff, and I just wanted to cover kind of my thoughts. So, to start off, I just want to talk about the things that are new in this update. So, for me, the ones to note are the new CPU rendering mode. You can also use it as a hybrid renderer, which is pretty sweet. Something that a lot of render engines are starting to support now, so that's cool to see. So we're going to be taking a look at that primarily today, but we also have a new user data string node, as well as USD procedural beta for Houdini. Also a new multi-scatter energy conservation mode, and a new standard material. That one's also a big one because there's new diffuse modes that come with that too, which is pretty sweet. And for me, which I've been getting more and more excited about, is RT, the real-time rendering engine that Redshift now has. Got a bunch of new things. So now it has support for hair and fur, depth of field, max on noise, which is probably the biggest thing for me because you use the max on noises, or at least I use max on noises all the time. Also, particle primitives and a new multi-scatter subsurface scattering mode, which is pretty sweet. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the CPU GPU hybrid rendering. So I have a scene set up here just with my typical setup that I use. This kind of this, should I say, the Quixel Megascans material that I kind of use to look at everything. But just a simple setup here. I am using the new standard surface material. This is kind of what it looks like in Houdini. Everything's kind of all in one little place here now. You also have some optimizations that you can do in here, as well as some advanced stuff that you can do in this last tab. But let's not focus on that too much. Super simple setup here with some displacement on it. And I want to show you first how that we can enable the new hybrid rendering mode. So we're going to go up to Redshift in the plugin options. And then now you see we do have a new couple of options here. So we have hybrid rendering, which I'm going to go ahead and check on, as well as our second device, which is going to be our CPU. So for me, I have a 3950X, which is a pretty powerful CPU. And actually, let's just kind of show what it looks like with just our CPU enabled. So I'm going to bring up our render view here, and it's going to refresh, and you can see how it starts to clean up. So it's pretty quick. I would say it's probably quicker with your CPU to first pixel. However, it is going to be a little bit slower to render and update, which kind of sucks. You can see it's taking a little bit to update here. Whereas if I go ahead and close that out, bring this back up, and we'll just enable both. I don't know if that's affected. I actually haven't tested this, but bring this in. Once it allocates all the memory and everything, it cleans up super quick. If we change, so it looks like it is taking a second. I wonder if that is for the CPU mode. So let's go ahead and just disable that for the moment. Bring a render view back up because it seems to be pretty quick in my experience with the GPU. Although it seems to be taking, oh no, it's pretty quick there. So definitely takes a little bit longer for it to update with the CPU enabled, or with the hybrid rendering mode, which kind of sucks, which is kind of a theme of this. I'm not super impressed with the CPU rendering mode. So let's go ahead and go to our out context. We're just gonna go ahead and render out a simple frame here. Just render to mplay. And it'll take a second to load up here. But in my experience with it so far, I'm going to say that the CPU rendering mode is pretty underwhelming. I'm not super happy with it. I know it's the first iteration of it, but it is pretty underwhelming in my opinion. So once this starts to render out here, you see it's going pretty quick, which is what you would expect with the Redshift and the GPU rendering mode. These are kind of big textures as well. But we got 14 seconds on that, and that was with just our GPU enabled. So let's go ahead and enable both and take a look at what happens. So I bring this back up here. You're going to see that it is gonna take a minute, but when we get loaded up, you see we start to have this bucket. This is gonna be your CPU bucket. It's loading a lot slower than the other ones, so easy to tell there which ones are your CPU, which ones are your GPU. But right away you can tell that this took longer to render than just on your GPU, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a hybrid render. Not the whole purpose, but it definitely is not something that's impressive. And that's something that I've seen quite a bit with my initial tests, is the render times for the hybrid render taking longer than just on the GPU, which really sucks. And if you were to go into our settings here, go to advanced, and we take a look at our global illumination. So if you're rendering solely on the GPU, or sorry, on the CPU, you definitely are not going to want to use the radiance point cloud. That takes forever to load. So you saw how quick it was there. Let's go ahead, actually just show you what that looks like. Go ahead and disable everything except for our CPU. Let's go back up here and render to MPlay. And this takes forever to load the radiance point cloud. Like, compared to the GPU, you see it was like almost instant with the GPU and the hybrid render. It was pretty much instant. This takes quite a long time to even start the render. So we're at 17 seconds before it even starts rendering, which is not good. And I thought maybe, you know, if we turn down the bucket size, I'm gonna go ahead and cancel this. But I thought if we took down the bucket size in our settings, which I don't remember where it's at now. Yeah, bucket size. So I thought if we took down our bucket size, maybe that would make it run faster, but that doesn't seem to work either, which really kind of sucks. That doesn't speed up the render, and in fact, it took it, it made it render slower, which it really sucks. So that's definitely not something that's going to help you out, but just wanted to kind of cover my thoughts on this new update. I haven't had a chance to take a look at much of the other stuff, haven't had a whole lot of time, but the GPU CPU rendering mode was kind of what really made me interested in updating right away and seeing what it looked like. So not too happy to see that it doesn't, you know, work very well. Now these are simple scenes that I've been testing with, nothing too complex. So maybe with more complex stuff, it would actually work a little bit better, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, because in my initial tests, it's been extremely slow compared to the GPU render by itself. So I figure that's only getting it worse with the more complexity. Maybe I'm wrong, but obviously this is the first update, first iteration into the CPU render, so I would expect it to have be a little bit slow and have some issues with it. Now, the one thing that I will say is between the CPU and the GPU, as well as the hybrid, there is zero difference between what the final look comes out to be, and from my initial tests. So that is very good thing for Redshift, because I know other render engines have struggled to have that visual parity, but Redshift did a very good job there. Unfortunately, it's just not worth using the CPU right now, for my opinion, but hopefully that'll change in the future. Obviously, like I said, this is the first iteration of this, so I expect it to get better and be more viable, but as of right now, I wouldn't recommend using it. But anyways, that's kind of my first thoughts on the new Redshift update. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what your initial tests and your initial thoughts are, but love to hear those. Anyways, I have a bunch of other videos on my channel, so make sure you check those out. A bunch of stuff on Houdini, go into some stuff on Redshift. I also have some stuff on Octane, Clarice, and Cinema 4D as well. So if you're interested in any of that, make sure you check that out. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and have a good day.